Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Welcome back to the Reliability Matters podcast. I'm Mike Conrad, your podcast host, and today we are in beautiful, sunny San Diego, California at the IPC Apex Expo, where we're recording this edition. My thanks to Trevor Galbraith. As you can see behind me, this is not my normal studio. He has allowed us to invade his space and has been kind enough to let me produce my podcast from his booth. So thanks to Trevor, thanks to Summer and David, who are pushing the buttons at just the right time. Yay, there you go. David's cheering himself. And I appreciate the work they're doing behind the scenes to make this thing happen. Today, on this episode, we're going to talk about two words that, when combined together, might have a different connotation to some people than others. One is the word big. I'll let that stand alone. The other is the word data. And obviously, we are a data-driven industry recently, and more. And the words big data, when used in social settings by the press, usually are used to describe privacy issues and things like that. And what I want to do is kind of dispel that myth. There are probably other issues with big data that are not subjects for this show that we can solve another day, but data has some real solid applications and some real benefits, and it's going to drive our industry into levels of efficiency in a direction that we probably have never seen at all in this industry. And one of the companies behind this data movement is Arch Systems. And I'd like to introduce my guest from Arch Systems, which is Luisa Herrmann. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you being here. I think you were ordered by your marketing staff to come to the booth and talk to Mike. So I appreciate the compliance. Let's just kind of start off, back up a little bit, and talk about Arch Systems. Tell me and my audience, what is Arch Systems? Who is Arch Systems? What does Arch Systems do? Where's your place in the universe here?
That's a great question. So Arch Systems is a company that was founded in the IoT space to, originally to collect data from machines and to improve processes with those machines. And now what we're doing is we have this layer where we collect data from all types of machines, all machine manufacturers, and we are able to take that data into our broker system. And from that, we can do analysis on it. We have all these applications. We can create dashboards. We can create actions, notifications. So just imagine that the machine data, all of the production data, is coming in, and you can do many actionable things with it. And Arch is really about being that layer that grabs that data and does these analytics on that data and showcases that to customers in ways where they can improve their efficiency, their utilization in their processes.
Okay, great. Your answer just generated about 8,000 questions for me. So we'll narrow it down to a few, right? Because this is not a 9-hour show. We've come a long way. Old machines. I started in this industry in 1985. And in those days, pretty much everything was analog, right? If you're keeping records, someone's got a clipboard and a pen, and they're just writing down facts or taking pressure readings off of gauges and whatever. And then, Excel came along, and now we're able to kind of crunch that data and at least display it in an organized fashion, apply some algorithms to it. That's great. Then digitization kind of comes along, and now we're able to start storing data. So machines start collecting data. And now we're to the point where we have the technical ability and the financial ability, due to technical capabilities increasing, to capture more and more data, hence the term big data. The question that comes to mind is, now that we have the technical capability to collect the data and the relatively cheap price of storage to store that data, the industry seemed to be less discerning over what it's going to collect. Because if it's cheap, just buy it all, right? Just collect everything. Then CFX and Hermes and other types of standards come along and they say, okay, we have a way, a protocol, a language to collect that data and pass it on to the next machine that might need it. Okay, great. Now we built a highway. We all agree we're going to drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road, whatever. We have the protocols. We now have, what's bigger than terabyte? A zillion byte. I don't know what it's called, but
Petabyte.
yeah, gigs of terabytes, right? Whatever that number is. We have terabytes worth of information that we all have available to us. What do we do with that information? What information should just be thrown away or archived for later purposes? What information is valid? So a lot of companies turn to the manufacturer of the machine that's collecting the data. And to me, it's a little bit like fox guarding a hen house situation, or at least potentially. Because if I'm a manufacturer of a machine and you're asking me for data that might reflect the performance or efficiency of the machine, I'm going to be very careful about what I give you. And you kind of have a selective data set. Then again, if I go to a company that specializes, like Arch Systems, for example, in collection of data and distribution of data and discerning data, what do you know about my process? So there seems to be this dilemma. So help me understand how the advantages of either just accepting the data right from a manufacturer of an OEM versus a company like yours. And if it is a company like yours, how do you know what's important and what bus should drive over the manufacturer or not, right? Does all that make sense?
No, it does make sense. And you started out this conversation by talking about big data. And there is this aspect of, for a long time, we couldn't collect the data. And then when we could collect the data, we could only store parts of it because storage was expensive. And so you had to be very careful and selective of which data you collected and stored. And so the insights that you could get from that data were restricted by the amount of data that you collected and stored. And now we're at a stage where you can collect everything because there are sensors everywhere. You can store everything because storage is cheap. And now it's, okay, and what do we do with all this data? And when, you're seeing at this show that there's a lot of people talking about insights and analytics and data, and machine manufacturers talking about the insights and the dashboards that you can have from their data. But I think it's an element of, like I said, Arch has this objective layer that collects data from all of the manufacturers. We work with the manufacturers to
versus a subjective layer if it came from an interested party.
Correct.
Right?
Where you would be able to select which data gets shown. But more importantly, this way you're able to collect data from many machines, many manufacturers, many types, the entire line in an SMT manufacturer, for example. We can collect that data and aggregate it and have it show, issues with attrition, for example, or machine faults that are happening. And if we're able to do that and we're able to surface all of that to the user across their entire line, across their entire factory even, then you don't need to rely on each individual manufacturer to have their own dashboard for that specific part of the process. You have a holistic view of the entire process and a holistic view of how you can improve it. So that's why, I'm biased, but as I should be. But I think that a solution like Arch, where you have that data collection across all of the parts of the manufacturing, all of the parts of the factory, where you can surface these opportunities for improvement, these insights, these analytics across all these different machines is better for the results that you're trying to achieve as a manufacturer than just getting the information specifically from each manufacturer. And the manufacturers also, like you said, there's maybe an incentive on what to collect, but there's also this, sometimes some of them are still on you have to select what you want to collect before you collect it based on the analytics that you want to get out, as opposed to just getting all of the data and doing all of the analytics.
Right.
That needs to be set up. So that a lot of our customers don't have a dedicated data science team.
Right.
So if they're being given all of this data with no context and they're told, interpret this, that's also not fair.
Ominous job. Right? Because then it becomes subjective again, because they're going to interpret what's important in their world, and they don't care about the next person down the line. They can do it themselves, right?
Right. And so if you don't have a process for doing that, there's just a lot that can go wrong. And that's when we get, big data can go wrong, can go very wrong.
And that's when big data gets its bad rap, right? Because it's just useless data.
Yeah.
Unless it's discerned properly and sorted and understood. That's what's the old saying? There's 3 types of lies, damn lies, and statistics. I think data can kind of fall into that category because data is very statistical, and one can choose to select data sets that prove their point. You and I can say something is white and something is black, and we can probably come up with enough data sets to prove our point, absent of other data sets. If I was a potential customer of Arch or any similar type of company, and I needed a project, what kind of, I'm sure there's some kind of discovery process where your team meets with their team and figures out what's important in their world and all the different types of equipment they're using and how that data is captured and transmitted and all that. Is that a long process? Or is it kind of, we take something close out of the box and we just tweak it to them? I don't know how customizable. To me, it seems like everything would be custom because every data set's kind of unique. But tell me how that works. I know that may not be your part of the company, but what's your awareness of how that part works?
Well, that is kind of in my whole wheelhouse.
Oh,
so
good. Okay,
I can definitely answer that one.
You're the captain of that ship. All right.
I am the head of product, so.
Okay, so it's on you.
If I wasn't able to answer that question, I would be in a lot of trouble once I left this booth.
Right. This would be the first and last interview you did, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Next time it would be, this is the former head of product development at Arch. Yeah.
So that's one of the main things that Arch is trying to do now is that there are other providers that have this very customizable solution where they go in to a large manufacturer and they look at their entire process, and it's more like a service than it is a software or a data product. But what Arch is aiming to do is to come up with a solution that is broad enough that we can come into a customer and say, you are an SMT manufacturer, you have these kinds of lines, you have these kinds of processes, you probably have issues with attrition, quality, utilization, machine faults. So
you just see their eyes light up when you say that. It's like, they get me.
Oh, you understand. Right? Exactly. Yeah. And so because we have worked with these customers and we have worked in this industry, we're able to, we know what the problems are. We know what kind of data they're looking for. We know how to get that data. So we're able to have something out of the box that at least collects, I would say gets us 80 or 90% of the way there. Because the machine manufacturers are pretty similar, the kinds of data, we have those connectors built or are building them to be able to connect to those machines. So our attempt at Arch is to get as close to out of the box as possible while still working with our customers to get that extra 10% as a service to get them the exact results that they need. So we are not on the custom bespoke service end. We are really trying to be a out of the box product as much as possible.
And how much of your effort is with the equipment manufacturers and the end users of that equipment? So obviously, equipment manufacturers may be a huge effort, but once you get it, you get it. As long as their protocols don't change, now you're golden. But do you ever get a new customer that's using some strange piece of equipment that doesn't really collect data the way it should be collected? And if so, do you have to come up with some unique interfaces? And do you work with that client, the customer's vendor, or do you work on their machine that they bought and tweak it? Is it done at the factory or is it done at the customer site?
It's primarily at the factory level.
Okay.
So we work with the manufacturer and look at the machines that they have and see what the protocols are. We do read, the product documentation from the manufacturer because that usually contains a lot of the information that we need. But actually, Arch started out as a hardware company with pods that would be placed in the machines to gather that information. So even machines that don't have that smart component to them, we can still get that data out because the pod still exists. So it is, whenever we find a different machine, we can build the connectors to make it work with our broker system.
Yeah.
So it is, and we are building relationships with the machine manufacturers as well, but it is primarily, we go into our customers are the manufacturers, the SMT manufacturers, and we talk to them about what their machines are and what their needs are directly.
Do you ever get, and don't name names obviously, but is there sometimes some resistance, a little bit of a wall from equipment manufacturers? Like you're going to come in and expose inconvenient truths or, truths nonetheless, some of them inconvenient, or are they a little bit guarded when a company like yours comes in and says, we want to tap into all your data?
So I won't name names.
Oh, please.
Of course not. But no, it's actually...
There's another place you won't be.
No.
We're filing you from everyone.
Not going to come to the show at all next year.
Exactly.
Can't show my face here. No. So the kind of resistance is actually related to something that I spoke a little bit about earlier, which is at the show, we're seeing a lot more of these companies talking about data. And so because these equipment manufacturers already have that data, they want to be the ones to provide the analytics solution and the analytics link.
Google, they want to sell the data.
They want to have the insights themselves, and that's being added to their machines, to their offering as an add-on or just something on top.
But that brings the fox in the henhouse scenario, right? How objective is the data if it's coming from a subjective reasoning?
It depends on how they are surfacing that.
Right.
How raw it is, how much analysis they're doing before the data gets surfaced, what kind of dashboards you can build, like how much customization you can do. All of that is going to depend. But I think more importantly, it's the fact that if each one of these has a different protocol and a different way to surface data and a different dashboard and a different analytics protocol, then you lose the objective layer that I was talking about, where you're able to collect all of that and have insights that are across the line or across the factory.
Right.
But I mean, I that's why I think the benefit of having something like Arch over the manufacturers. But I take it as a good thing that there's this renewed focus on data, that everyone suddenly realizes.
We can all agree on that. Everyone whether they have a horse in a race or not, they can all agree that the good part is the data, right?
Yes.
You can argue over what gets parsed and what gets shown and not shown and censored or whatever, but
we're all talking about Industry 4.0.
Exactly. So if a customer says, okay, we want to start crunching the data, we've got all this stuff, we don't understand it, and they go to a company like Arch, do they, as a kind of a stereotype, do they generally come to you and say, show us everything you think we need to see, or do they kind of want to drive the train and say, we want to see this, this, and this? And if that's the case, are you ever in a position where you have to say, really, you need more than you, or that's not the way it should be interpreted? Because data's your world.
Yes.
Data's not most contract manufacturers' world or OEM's world, right?
Correct.
Part of it, but it's not their world. Because you live in data, do people listen to your advice? Do you steer them, kind of guided discovery? Do you get them to agree that that's a good idea, to change what their original perspective was and what their needs were? Does that question make sense?
It makes sense. And again, you're asking a question that if I can't answer, then I'm not doing my job.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think that, so the Arch FX platform that we launched is relatively new. Before, we were just working with the customers to get the right data out, and have them say, we need something that does this or that. And so we've just started on the path where we are being more prescriptive on what we offer. And here's what we think you need. Like I said, based on, we understand you. We understand what your problems are. We're going to create a suite of solutions that are going to address those problems. And we're going to work together to make sure that works. And I think that they do trust us to know, because like you said, it is our world. But
right.
Every contract manufacturer, every SMT manufacturer has their own quirks, has their own individual, characteristics. And so they do want us to understand what those characteristics are. And we know that they exist. We don't say that we understand everything. And so there's a balance there that I think is really interesting as to how much we are prescriptive and how much we let the customer tell us what they want.
And how guarded are customers, if they are guarded? Given the fact that your company will come in to contract manufacturer A, show them how to crunch all their data, and then you're going right across the street to their competitor, contract manufacturer B, showing them the same thing. Are they asking you to show firewalls between, make sure that their data is not shared with someone else's data? Is that a concern people express? And if so, do you jump ahead of that, or?
I mean, there's a concern in general when we're talking about data, where, Arch is a cloud solution. So we take the data and we put it into the cloud so that we can do the analytics.
You have an SAS model? Is that
the
thing? Yeah.
So, we're not on-prem. Your data is leaving the factory, which is the way where we can provide a lot of our analytics, and the fact that we can provide a global view of all of the factories, not just the local information. And so there is a lot of sensitivity around the fact that data is leaving. And so I think once a customer gets to the point where they're okay with their data leaving and going into the cloud, then they understand the security that's necessary, and we can show them that we have.
You want to make sure their data sent up and come back.
Right, and doesn't go anywhere else.
Anywhere else.
Yes.
Not ricochet off.
Correct.
Else.
Yes.
What about if a company's ITAR, which is, security, super tight security, nothing can leave the building. When we sell we're an equipment manufacturer, we sell equipment. If it goes into an ITAR facility or something similar, we literally have to super glue connectors into all the USB slots so that you can't use them. Talk about high security.
Yes.
Gorilla glue or super glue. But the point is,
hey, that works,
we have to remove all the drivers for the Wi-Fi, which someone could install easily, but it's hard to when all the USB slots are glued shut. So the point is nothing can leave the facility. Is that not just in an Arch world, but in just data collection world and Industry 4.0 world and all that? Is there a workaround? Can that be done, server-based in their building? Is it only cloud-based? What are the options?
So it is primarily cloud-based for the reasons that I mentioned. I mean, if we have that objective layer and it stays on-prem, then you lose the analytics, you lose the global.
You're doing all the crunching in your server farm somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And at your facility, secure facility, and then sending the data back. I would imagine if you were to do all that terabytes of data crunching on-prem, you'd end up with multiple server farms everywhere. Which all have to be connected to the outside world anyway to stay updated, right? So
they would need to be updated. They wouldn't have the same analytics. They wouldn't have global views of, there's a view, there's global KPIs in ArchFX where you can see all of the stats for factories like all over, and you wouldn't have that. So there are solutions that are on-prem and that offer that, but Arch is very much on the cloud. But what I wanted to, one of the things that you mentioned was there is a balance there to be stricken, and I think that's a broader conversation than just manufacturing. Sure. But in big data, there's a balance of, you have to give data to get insights.
Yeah.
And there is, I think a lot of these manufacturers are still trying to find that balance of how much data they want to give in order to see the value that they're going to get out of it. And that's a lot of the conversations that we have is how much value am I getting out of this if I give you all of this?
Sure. Here's a slogan for you. Data is the currency for which wisdom is purchased, right? So it has to leave. It has to be an exchange. You can't get the wisdom without the data.
Correct.
And it has to go somewhere and get laundered, so to speak, so that it can come back in a different form and be
that is useful,
tangible. Well, we're out of time. If our audience wants to get a hold of you, I'll put Luisa's contact information in the show notes. So if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, just kind of look down, click show more, and you'll see information on Arch Systems and how to get a hold of Luisa. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching. If you're listening to this on the treadmill or in your car or whatever you're doing, I don't want to know, whatever you're doing, be sure to hit the subscribe button on your local podcast app so you will be notified when new episodes are released. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of every month. Once again, my thanks to Trevor and his magnificent crew for loaning me his booth. And if you're watching this live, thanks for watching. And if you are watching this on the Reliability Matters channel, I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.